The message arrived at 2:17 a.m., glowing on the cracked screen of my phone like a dare from the universe. I was half asleep, heart bruised from a year that had taught me how fragile plans could be, when her words pulled me fully awake. It wasn't a love confession or a crisis call. It was a request that felt absurd and dangerous at the same time, the kind that could either heal something broken or shatter what little balance I had left. In that moment, staring at the ceiling of my tiny apartment in Columbus, Ohio, I felt the weight of a choice I didn't know I'd been preparing for my entire life. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet courage it takes to show up for someone when it's inconvenient, please like this video, comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel right now. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. I had known Grace Miller for 7 years, long enough to memorize the small things people don't usually notice. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous, the way she laughed before finishing a joke, the way she carried guilt like a second purse on her shoulder. We met at a church fundraiser in Dayton, when we were both pretending to have our lives together. She was a nursing student with tired eyes and stubborn faith, and I was a youth counselor who had just lost his father and was learning how silence could be louder than grief. Our friendship grew in the cracks of busy weeks and Sunday afternoons, built on shared coffee and shared disappointments. I loved her once, quietly, responsibly, the way you love someone you don't want to lose. When she married someone else, I learned how to be proud of her and empty at the same time. By the time that message arrived, Grace was recently divorced, a word she hated and wore like a bruise. Her parents lived in a small town in Indiana, the kind of place where neighbors noticed everything, and family reputations mattered more than weather forecasts. Her father, Thomas Miller, was a deacon with strong opinions and a soft spot for tradition. Her mother, Ruth, believed love should look tidy from the outside. Grace had avoided visiting since the divorce, fearing the questions that came wrapped in concern and prayer. Now a family anniversary had forced her hand, and she needed a solution that felt safe. She needed someone who knew her history, who could stand in her parents' living room without flinching, someone who wouldn't judge her for falling apart and putting herself back together. She needed me. I answered yes before I finished thinking, because sometimes courage is just deciding to be useful. The weekend came faster than expected. I drove my old sedan through gray Midwestern skies, rehearsing how to be convincing without lying, how to be present without pretending too much. Grace met me outside her parents' house with a smile that tried to be brave. The house itself looked like a memory preserved, white siding, trimmed hedges, a porch swing that creaked with patience. Inside, framed Bible verses lined the hallway like witnesses. I felt my shoulders tighten, but I also felt a strange calm, the calm that comes when you step into a role that fits more than you expected. Dinner that night was a careful dance. I helped Thomas carry plates to the table, and listened to Ruth ask questions that sounded casual but landed with purpose. I spoke about my work with church youth, about my father's passing, about believing in commitment even when life complicates it. I watched Grace relax inch by inch, the way people do when they realize someone is standing between them and the storm. Later, we sat on the porch while cicadas hummed like a choir. No lines were crossed, no rules broken. There was simply the comfort of being understood without explanation. When I slept that night, it was on the couch, as promised by my own conscience, and I stared at the ceiling fan wondering when care had started to feel like hope again. The next morning brought a test none of us expected. Thomas collapsed in the kitchen, his breath shallow, his face drained of color. The house shifted into urgency. Grace moved on instinct, hands steady, voice calm, the nurse she had trained to be shining through fear. I drove fast, prayed faster, and held Ruth's hand in the waiting room as if it were my own mother's. Hours passed in fluorescent light. When the doctor finally spoke, relief washed over us like rain. A blockage caught in time, recovery ahead, gratitude everywhere. Something changed after that. In crisis, masks fall away. Ruth looked at me differently, not as a temporary solution, but as someone who had stayed when it mattered. Thomas squeezed my hand with a strength that surprised us both. Grace cried in the hallway, and I stood beside her, not as a role, not as a favor, but as a constant. We returned home quieter, gentler. That night, we talked about faith and failure, about how love doesn't always arrive on schedule, about the difference between pretending and choosing. No promises were made, none were needed. Sunday came with church bells and casseroles from neighbors. Sitting in the pew, I felt the weight of a community that believed in restoration, even if it didn't always know how to practice it. Grace sang softly, eyes closed, and I realized I wasn't acting anymore. I wasn't borrowing a title to help a friend. I was standing in the truth that some relationships grow from patience, watered by time and tested by circumstance. When the service ended, Thomas introduced me not as a label but as family. The words settled into my chest with a warmth I hadn't felt since my father was alive. We drove back that evening under a sky brushed with gold. The road stretched open, and so did the future, cautiously, respectfully. Grace didn't need saving. She needed witnessing. I didn't need fixing. I needed purpose. Somewhere between the cornfields and the city lights, I understood that love doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly, dressed as a favor, and stays because it belongs. Before we reach the ending, please pause for a moment and comment below with a heart, or the word hope, if this story is reminding you that unexpected beginnings can lead to real healing. Weeks later, we took things slow, the way people do when they know what rushing can ruin. We talked about boundaries and fears, about honoring the past without living inside it. We learned each other again, honestly this time, without the safety of pretending. Her parents checked in often, gratitude still fresh, trust still growing. Life resumed its normal chaos, but something solid had formed underneath it. On an ordinary Tuesday, I realized I was no longer bracing myself against loneliness. I was walking beside someone, not ahead, not behind. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can open doors you didn't know existed, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement tells us these stories matter, and it helps us keep telling them. In the end, what began as a simple request became a turning point neither of us planned. It taught me that showing up is sometimes the bravest form of love, that faith can look like action, and that second chances often arrive disguised as inconvenience. We didn't rewrite our histories, but we honored them by choosing differently. And that, I've learned, is how healing becomes real, one weekend at a time.